Meeting of Monday, June 21st, 2024. We'll call the meeting to order at 5:32. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Claudia Arona.
Here.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown, absent. Mayor Infante.
Here. If you'll follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Do we have any public communications asked for on this closed session? No. Anybody in the audience? No. Okay, in that case, we are going to recess to closed. I'm sorry, do you want to give us the rules? You know, these lawyers. Go ahead, give us the rules.
The city holds closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6 to conduct labor negotiations in conference with the city's designated representative, Chelsea O'Sullivan, city attorney, regarding the city manager and unrepresented employee. Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll recess to closed session. Thank you. Gentlemen, we have returned from closed session, and Madam Attorney, if you would give us the results, please.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor. No reportable action other than that direction was given to staff. Thank you.
In that case, the closed session is closed. We will reconvene at 6:30 with the open session. Good evening. Welcome to the regular Monday meeting for June 24th, 2024. Calling the meeting to order at 6:30. Roll call, please, Ms. Clerk.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Claudia Arona.
Here.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem absent. Mayor Infante.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jim, if you would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, so now we have an opportunity for the public to speak on non-agenda items. I have some sign-up cards, and I'll start with Mr. Steve Brown.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Infante, council members, other folks here and on Zoom. My name is Steve Brown. I'm a resident of Solvang. I truly regret having to say that I find the process by which 24-25 funding was addressed over the last 3 council meetings both very irregular and quite disturbing. I have more questions and comments than time, so I'll restrict myself to what I believe to be one singular salient council moment on May 28th. Full disclosure, let me say that as a member of the Senior Center and a contributor to food distribution at Bethania, I definitely have skin in the game. These and other local nonprofits provide, I believe, priceless services to this community and in particular to seniors like myself. This obviously has informed my view of this funding process. So a thing I find most confusing about the process on 528 is this. First, Councilmember Brown is required to recuse himself while the funding for a particular nonprofit where he has a conflict of interest is carved out and fully restored. Then he is brought back in and allowed to vote with Mayor Infante and Councilmember Clark to not consider other grant requests separately and additionally, only for the draconian cuts in funding recommended by the ad hoc committee and staff. Wow, a twofer. How efficient, how fortunate that Councilmember Brown was available to break a 2-2 deadlock that would otherwise have forced some discussion, perhaps even negotiation on such a consequential vote. For if it were me, I would definitely want the funding for the conflicted nonprofit remain fully and restored. After all, I'd just been told it had been. And I wouldn't want the other grants to be considered one by one, nor would I want the overall funding for those applicants reconsidered, because it would then bring into sharp focus the full restoration of funding for one grant, while all the rest were being either dramatically reduced or zeroed out altogether. I have to say, taken in full, the 24-25 grant process doesn't look good. If I'm being cynical, I might conclude that some council members, the presumed deficit became an opportunity to begin redefining the Solvang's position on the funding of nonprofits, and that in the end, the deficit problem was not the problem at all. Thank you. That's my comment.
Thank you very much. Jim Richardson.
In the back of the council's mind and in some of the staff are thoughts of paid parking in the city. I ran across a letter to the editor in Newshawk that pointed out some negatives toward that, and I'm going to read that newsletter, or that letter to the editor, and I'm going to quote it. One of my favorite quotes is, "I will never understand why common sense is why it's called common sense when it isn't so common. I recently sold my office retail property in the 900 block of State Street in Santa Barbara after almost 40 years of ownership and moved my investments to Texas. Being a third-generation Santa Barbaran, it pains me to have to make those kinds of decisions. The one-on-one relationship between retail sales volume and available shopping time should be easily discerned by even the most unaware city official. Obviously, this is not the case. When I purchased this property, there was no parking garages. State Street was very healthy and getting healthier by the year. Note, public parking downtown was free for 4 hours, and many retailers offered coupons to customers for the $25 cents an hour overtime charge. Then along came parking garages, which was a good thing, and the 4-hour time period due to the questionable budgeting was necessarily reduced to 3 hours, with overtime charge being increased accordingly. Not so many years later, to balance the budget, free time was again reduced to 2.5 hours, then to 2 hours, and currently 90 minutes. The progressive loss of income from the retail sales continued to negatively impact the city parking garage budget, so efforts were made to increase the income from parking fees to make up the difference. It should be obvious to anyone with just the tiniest amount of common sense that retail sales have diminished in precise parallels with reductions in free parking time. Admittedly, Amazon's brilliant execution of online retail sales has had a significant impact, but the fact is inescapable that these two factors have destroyed the health of our vital downtown. The city budget administration has been aware of cutting shopping time to balance the budget with such a certain path to self-destruction. Downtown could have been readily handled Amazon's impact. Hopefully, city officials are aware of these recent changes, increasing free parking time in San Luis Obispo. At least there's someone with a minimum of common sense making important government decisions for that city. It is increasingly sad that Santa Barbara city administrators are so obvious to the obvious. And that's the end of the quote. It's just food for thought, and I hope that you can understand parking time means sales.
Thank you very much. Eddie Sway? Did I say that right?
Shui.
Shui?
Yeah.
Feng Shui. I got it. Eddie, you're up.
Mr. Mayor and council, thank you for hearing me. May I approach the bench and give you a letter? So I have a proposal for a fee change, and this only affects about 4 businesses in Solvang, and it has to do with the local firearms licensing. So recently, the city increased the fees from the initial fee was $80, plus you pay your home occupation fee of $392, and then a $34 general licensing fee with the city. And it increased to $200 initially, and from $15 renewal to $80 a year. And I don't have a problem with increasing fees, but I think that there should be some type of reasoning behind it, if it's, increased staff time or, direct costs that are involved. And it's unclear to me what the reason for the increase for that is. And the biggest part of this, though, is the fees are not in line with the federal licensing, which is like a 3-year license. So if it was a 3-year license, it would be in line with the federal government, and it would be easier for state DOJ to regulate our licensing. What happens is, we get a letter from DOJ every year saying, hey, we need your state licensing, or we're going to, suspend your license, because the federal license is a multi-year license. So, if it was $80 for like a 3-year license, I think that would make more sense. The city of Solvang doesn't have a lot to do with regulating these types of businesses. You have ATF agents that come out to your home and look. And I have a home FFL, and I've talked to some other people who have them too, and they feel the same way about this. It would just be easier if it was a 3-year fee, regardless of what it is, if you're going to raise it or whatnot. I don't know if there is a policy of notifying people when fees are going to be raised or not.
Have to look into that.
And that's all I have. The basic bottom line is it would be a lot easier if it was in line with the federal licensing. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Eddie.
Al Cortese.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'm Al Cortese, Solvang. Tonight I want to reference an article regarding a builder's remedy 30-unit housing project proposed for Grand Avenue in the Lower Riviera of Santa Barbara, an area of mostly single-family homes with ocean views. Rob Frederick, the executive director of the Housing Authority of the city of Santa Barbara, was quoted in the article as saying that the city needs affordable housing, but that neighborhood compliance also matters. Here's the quote from Mr. Fredericks. Personally, I don't think it is good for Santa Barbara having projects like these snub their nose at the zoning that was deliberated by past planning commissions and city councils, he said. Quote, we certainly need more housing, specifically affordable, but projects should adhere to where they fit. Cass Ensberg, a member of the City Historic Landmark Commission, also described the project as, quote, shockingly insensitive to the direct neighborhood and also the broader community. It is the wrong place for a project of that scale, she said. This proposal is not a good example of the kind of development we need. Although that's Santa Barbara, I think the lessons therein are relevant for Solvang and carry an appropriate additional guideline in evaluating what a developer, our developer, calls Wildwood, in our view more appropriately named Deadwood. And I must add, please do not allow the destruction of what might be the last windswept valley oak battling the elements at top the north knoll of Site C to mark the destruction of local control over the appearance and character of Solvang. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all the slips I have for right now. Does anybody else want to say anything at this point? I don't think we have anybody on Zoom. Okay, then we'll bring it back and we'll listen to the city manager give us a report.
Good evening. I have a few things I'd like to talk about. First, I want to share a video. I mentioned in the recent past that we've signed up with a survey company called FlashVote, and we're starting to promote the signups for that. And so I want to show this little 1-minute video that kind of shows what it's about. So, Laser, if you'll indulge me on here. So this is a group that I've worked with before. They're professional surveyors. It's all online. They're not going to be making phone calls. They have you sign up in advance, and then they send out these surveys. We're interested in the community, not just the residents of Solvang. There is a way to kind of parse out, if we're looking specifically about Solvang and city residents, that we can say, okay, this portion of the group are city residents. Assuming we get enough signups, that's statistically valid to plus or minus about 6 or 7%. So it's a good way to gauge the community's interest in various topics, and we'll be working with marketing and with Candace in particular to get those things out to our community. And so the important thing is to sign up now, and then the surveys will be forthcoming. One of the first ones we're going to do is about water softeners, since we have issues at our wastewater treatment plant regarding sodium content. So that'll probably be the first one coming out here in the next few weeks, but we need people to sign up, so please start doing that now. A couple of other things. Roger brought a contract here recently forward about some concrete repair in Alice Al Glen neighborhood. That's going to begin on July 1st, so next week. And it will be removing and replacing existing concrete curbs, gutters, sidewalks that are damaged or have been uplifted by street trees. The work will move from block to block with concrete saw cutting and removal, followed by the replacement in a timely and orderly fashion. The contractor will be distributing notices to residents affected by the work. The city encourages the traveling public to walk and drive safely around the work and obey temporary sidewalk and lane closures as well as temporary parking restrictions. This project is funded by Measure A, transportation sales taxes. Business talks, that meeting is this Thursday with Raphael and Candace here in City Hall Council Chambers from 5:30 to 7 p.m. Talking specifically this time about sign ordinances and marketing in general, so encouraging the public to participate in that meeting. A couple of upcoming agenda items. Next meeting will be a presentation from 3CE. We're also going to have the general plan, EIR resolution, and then adopting the general plan. So that begins that process. There'll be a second meeting the fall after that, and then 30 days after that, it becomes effective. Alamo Pintado Bridge project discussion will happen on August 12. That's the one just east of Alamo Pintado, I guess, over the creek. Frontier Communications is going to be here talking about broadband in our community on August 26th. And we're going to have Dave Molinek from League of Cities doing a legislative update on September 23rd. And that's all I have for now.
Thank you.
Questions for Randy on the city manager's report? Okay. I'm curious about the flash vote. I think that's fascinating. It lets anybody get on anytime and give their opinions. Do we perchance have a list of what subjects will be coming up in the future so we know to get onto it?
We haven't developed that yet, but yes, that will be part of the conversation. The contract we signed allows for 6 per year, so about every other month. We could do it more frequently. It'll just cost us a little bit more money. But the idea would be as something comes up and the council wants to gauge the community's interest or opinion about various things, we could do that. And again, this company, they're professional surveyors. A lot of times you inadvertently can bias the outcome of a survey if you don't word it properly. So this is something that they do, and it would be a good way to gauge the community interest. City residents as well as the community at large. Obviously, we have a lot of folks that work here or live just outside the city limits that we value their opinion as well. So,
How are we advertising this to our residents or to the population?
well, currently we're putting it out on our Facebook and website, and obviously I mentioned it today.
Right.
So there'll be some. We'll probably put it in the water bills and things like that. So
That's what I was going to suggest. Everybody gets a water bill, and sometimes they read what goes in the envelope.
right.
But I would like everybody to know about this so we get everybody's opinions in advance. I think that
Which is why I'm bringing it up tonight, so that
Thank you.
we're trying to get the word out right now.
excellent. Thank you. No other questions on this? Okay, in that case, let's go to the council report out, council comments and requests. Comments from anybody?
I have some.
Go ahead, please, sir.
I'd just like the residents to understand that, again, if we didn't have Measure U, the city would be running a deficit right now, so there's not a whole lot of money to go around. I would also like, because we've heard from a lot of business owners over the years about the Saturday events, the bike races, et cetera, and this weekend I received several pictures of vacancy signs on hotels. And I know I've heard that people, business owners like to point out that some one-day Saturday events are difficult on the hotels. We don't get the two-night stays like we would. And as I say, I've heard this going back and forth. I don't know if there's some way we could figure this out and look at TOT revenue when we do have a one-day event versus weekends that we don't. If we can somehow tie those two numbers together to give definitive answers to the business owners that are concerned about this. And, I mean, some business owners say that the one-day events are great, some say that it kills their business for the weekend, and we have one of these, when is the car show?
October, September?
Yeah, I think one of the business owners was concerned that registration starts next week, but
Yeah.
not the car show.
No.
So, but I would like to, if we could finally put an answer to this, to what impact the one-day events have on the hotels and have on the TOT and the revenue to the city, if we can somehow figure that out, and I would like to see that happen. And also, the last thing I have is, when I would like to know the timing. Mr. Richardson made some very good points about parking, but I have a feeling that as that time went on, the hours went down, the business went down, but also in a state like, if you give it away, they will come. Everybody knows the homeless population on State Street has increased exponentially over the last 20 years. And if that has anything to do with that timing of the parking, if that is a factor in it, I'd like to know that. I don't have an answer. I'm just thinking that everybody knows. I mean, a lot of people that I know, nobody goes to State Street anymore because it's not a pleasant place to be, beside the fact that Nordstrom is closed, et cetera. And there's contractor offices like Santa Maria Mall not contractor offices, but businesses you wouldn't normally see in a shopping environment in the Paseo. And that's, of course, going to go a different direction soon anyway. But those are my points.
Thank you. Ms. Arona?
No comments.
No comments.
No? Okay, a couple of things quickly. So, a week or so ago, we had the city leadership of Santa Barbara meeting here. So we had the mayors and city managers of all the cities in the county meeting in this room, actually. It was terrific because we got to talk to each other about what we're doing in each of our respective cities and how that might affect some of the other cities and what we can do together. So we talked about short-term rentals, we talked about TOT measures, wastewater treatment plant permitting. We had a great presentation by Carollo on the wastewater permitting and compliance in the entire county. Was great stuff. I really got a lot out of that meeting. I thought it was terrific. SB-CAG North Regional Meeting, we had that here a couple weeks ago. That's where we get all the people from northern Santa Barbara County to talk about some of the issues and go on there. There was SB-CAG meeting. APCD, the Air Pollution Control District Board meeting. Couple of points that were interesting. One, of course, is the LEAF program, which is the Landscape Electrification Equipment Program, where they will help you fund electric tractors and things like that for your agricultural or blowers and lawn care stuff. There was an update on the vessel speed reduction program. If you're not aware of that, the APCD started out a few years ago paying these big transport ships to slow down going through the Santa Barbara area. And they did that because if you keep your speed below 10 miles an hour, it is a significant reduction in air pollution. The other significant reduction is in whale strikes. So this has been so successful that most of these shipping companies aren't even asking for the money anymore. They're doing it as just being a good partner. And there's a lot of the people that are involved in this. It's going to go all the way up the coast into the Bay Area. They've already started some up there. There's a discussion on moving it all the way up into the Canadian border. So it will happen all the way up and down the coast. We had a meeting here for the San Ynez River meeting on homeless issues. It was an educational process more than anything else. Nothing really to report out of that. I think that was the end of it. Did I go through everything? Yes, sir.
I also received, like Council Clark, a few communications about folks in their community that are questioning, the current process. And we do have an item on the September 23rd currently scheduled, special event weekend impact on businesses discussion with Parks and Rec. We are also in discussion with the Tourism Marketing Advisory Committee, TMAC, getting input from local businesses about their experience with the various events, and so we're getting some feedback. So that'll be part of that discussion. So we do have that coming before council in the next few months.
Let me add a couple more things real quickly while I'm thinking about them. The parking is a big issue, and I have started a discussion with a group that might get us some additional parking that will help in that situation a lot. Also, I completely lost what else I was going to say. Yeah, it is. It's a mic moment. I know what I was going to say. There was a comment about the grant funding, and we're going to hear a lot about that, the funding on our budget meeting in just a couple of minutes. So I want stand by for that. I think you'll be pleased with some of the things we're going to be doing. All right. Nothing else? In that case, let's move on to number 6, the consent items. If you'd read that into the record, please, Ms. Clerk.
Consent is for routine administrative city matters and is approved with one motion. These items are discussed only on request of council members. Members of the public were afforded an opportunity to speak during the public communications portion of this agenda.
Okay, so do you have any items on the consent agenda that any of you wish to pull for discussion?
Nothing to pull. If I could make a clarification, in the past, consent items that were of any value, the city manager had a limit. I think it was $100,000 that they just signed off on, and the city manager, as in his quest to make things more open, puts most everything on the consent agenda. So that's why we're seeing more of this, but I have nothing to pull.
Okay, very good. Anybody else?
No, I just want to thank the staff for answering my questions, clarifying a few things on the numbers and the contracts. Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay, then we need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items as listed.
And
I'll
if
say.
we, before the second, if we could just clarify with that motion that item 6I is as reflected, is the corrected item as reflected in the blue
Yes.
folder.
My apologies, I forgot that. Thank you, Attorney.
Amend the motion to approve the consent agenda with the amended 6I inclusion.
I'll second it.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Claudia Arona.
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown absent. Mayor Infante.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. So let's go to item 7 then, please.
I'm sorry, for the minutes to correct the prior motion, passed 4-0, not 5-0.
4-0, right, because David's not here. Okay.
Public hearing to consider adopting resolution number 24-1265, amending the appropriation limit for fiscal year 2024 through 2025 pursuant to Article 13B of the California Constitution.
Thank you. Staff report, please.
Is this on? Oh, okay, sorry, I've never used
You're
this
on.
one before. Okay. Okay, so tonight we have, we need approval by resolution to approve the appropriation limit, which is the general fund allotment for expenses. We're required by law to adopt appropriation limit, and for 24-25, based on the per capita personal income, population change, and the growth factor, the increase will be $873,511, which allows us to spend $24,651,978, which, based on general fund, our revenue is 10.9 million, and so we have lots of room, and we won't be spending that much money. So that will go back to you guys for questions.
Questions? No? Yeah. Randy?
I was just going to say, this is an annual process. It's basically an administrative thing based on the legislation. We're required to do this on an annual basis. I remain hopeful that we'll have a windfall, that we can spend this much money, but it'll be a long time before we ever actually get there, I'm sure. But it goes up every year based on a calculation of CPI and population growth.
So this keeps us in line with the state requirements,
Yes.
basically. Thank you.
And the state's the one that dictates the per capita and the population change and the growth factor. That comes in a letter from the state. So we put our figures into those calculations, and that's how we come up with the 24 million.
Okay. I do not have any slips for public speakers. Do we have anybody in the audience that would like to talk? Say something? It's all a good joke?
Mayor, if you could just formally open the public hearing, since this is a public hearing item.
Okay. But what do I do to publicly?
Just say the public hearing is open.
We never did that before. Okay, public hearing is open, and we would like to hear anybody's comments that they have with regard to considering adopting the Resolution 24-1265. We have nobody in the audience that appears to want to speak to this. I have no slips, and we have nobody on Zoom. So we need a vote then, right?
Close the public hearing first.
Close the public hearings.
Thank you.
We don't do these public hearings very often. We'll close the public hearings and take it back to, actually, we don't need to do a vote on this, do we, at this point?
You need to do a motion to approve it by resolution.
Yeah,
Okay.
so motion to adopt resolution number.
That's why it's a
Can
resolution.
I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution number 24-1265 for the appropriation limit for fiscal year 24-25.
A second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Claudia Arona.
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown, absent. Mayor Infante.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
All right, so we're out of public hearings. Let's go to discussion items. How about 8A?
Discussion, excuse me.
Read that into the record, please.
Discussion and possible action to approve Amendment 2 to the agreement with MNS Engineers, Inc. for engineering support, environmental permitting for the South Alisal Emergency Repair Project for the additional amount not to exceed $7,110 for a total contract amount not to exceed $194,278, and extend the term to June 30th, 2025, and authorize the mayor to execute on behalf of the city.
Thank you. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Anne Marie. This was one of our contract extensions, but since there was some other things that I thought you might be interested in, I figured we'd make this more of a presentation, but I promise I'll keep it short because I know there's a bit of budget to talk about today.
Yeah.
So, I'll move forward pretty quickly. But as you're well aware, in early 2023, we had a pretty massive storm, and there was some pretty good damage to Alisal Road, to the downslope on Alisal Road. So here's some pictures of the damage that was shared at the time. And there was an emergency contract granted to Hanley Engineering Contractors, and as well as MSN, that's easy for me to say, MNS Engineers to help us with the project oversight and the environmental, because there was an environmental permit that needed to be, we had to get down to the creek and do some work. And so they were instrumental in helping, assisting us with that, so we entered into contract with them. Also, mainly because we were also going to be seeking FEMA reimbursement for this work, so we needed to make sure that we had everything on the up and up and everything was completely dialed in. So, so we completed the project, and again, so here's some pictures of some of the damage that was there. Here's a picture of, good picture of, here's the kind of the bottom row of the riprap that was installed, and then we had to build the slope based on that. And here's the road that had to be cut down into the creek. And this is, I wanted to show this picture because it's plays to the repair to the repair, so to speak, is kind of what we had to do. Because as part of the environmental permit, there was a remediation that needed to be done. So we had a permit with the Army Corps of Engineers because it is a water of the U.S. So an environmental permit was required. It required the development and execution of a remediation plan. So M&S, per their contract that we initially got with them, they started working on the remediation plan. It became, the back and forth became a little bit more intense than what was originally anticipated. So they had to, so we came back in October and did amendment number 1 to pay them for the additional work that they needed to do just to get the remediation plan together. And then we got the remediation plan taken care of, addressed and approved by the Army Corps and by the other permitting agencies, and then we needed to execute it, which is we needed to repair the slope and do some plantings and stuff. So we put it out to bid. We didn't get any bids. So then we said, okay, well, let's work with that allows us now, based on our purchasing policy, we can go to, just go to a contractor. We got a price from a contractor that was close to $60,000, which we thought was excessive for the amount of work. So then we looked at it, we reached out to M&S, said, okay, well, what's really required here? And we realized that we could do most of the work in-house. Also, but we did need a little bit of help with a contractor doing some on-site stuff. One of those was, so the remediation plan is a 2-year maintenance period of the slope, which we're about a year through now. Dressing up the slope and removal of the weeds. Planting coastal live oak and sycamore, 36 total trees that we had to plant. We also placed some jute netting and a seed mix for ground cover, and that was done by city staff. And then the willow and mule fat shoot placement was something they had to actually acquire on site. And so I don't know what a mule fat is. I wouldn't know a willow if it was weeping on me, to be honest with you. So so we needed a biologist to actually do the right cutting and do the right establishment and do what the Army Corps and the other permit agencies wanted us to do. So we said, hey, M&S, give us a price. So it was about $7,000 with the price. They've actually, so the contract amendment that we're requesting is for that $7,110, which is what their original proposal was. Now, I'm told anecdotally that it actually came in around 4,000, a little over 4,000, but I don't have the billings yet, so I can't. So I can't verify that. So I'm just saying, hey, contract amendment for 7,000, because that's what their proposal was. And then, so the work was completed by city staff and contractors. So here's some pictures. So here's the slope. So here's where, here's one of our guys crawling down the slope placing the jute netting. So here's the jute netting and some planting. You can see, you can kind of see from the far. So we planted some trees in the middle of this. And then this was that road that showed you in this past picture. Here's that road. Well, we had to, so we put some plantings and put some mulch on there as recommended by the biologist to try to establish that. Because what we don't want is people then, hey, I got a dirt bike. I'm going to drive down that road into the creek. It's like, no, we're going to get it planted. So we place some, some barriers up top. But then once this starts growing with weeds, with with the native plantings from the seed mix. Once that starts growing up, then it'll be established, and it's not going to be an attractive access to the creek. And then here's what M&S did. So they, again, they gathered these, I think these are willows, and here's where they placed them right next to the creek. And then here's some other shoots. I'm assuming those are the mule fat, whatever those are. So it looked like sticks to me, but again, it's, we played a game of pickup sticks, and it cost us a couple $1,000. From a FEMA perspective, the project, including the remediation plan, is eligible for FEMA reimbursement, and all of this has been submitted to FEMA. Now we're just waiting for them to get back. So, and then what happens is they approve it. There's some back and forth every once in a while. I mean, as recently as about a week and a half ago, I had to give them some of the stuff that we showed where our procurement for the general contract with Hanley Engineering was. So we got all that to them. So they're still working on it. Then they're going to get it to the state, and then Cal OES, then actually sends us all the money, including their portion of it as well. So that's the process. So it's a hurry up and wait at this point. The action tonight is to extend the contract until June 30th, 2025, which will allow M&S to do the final closeout of the remediation plan and the environmental permit. But with the additional amount of $7,110 for the harvesting and planting of the willow and mule fat shoots by the biologist. That concludes staff's presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All for $7,000.
Was that?
All for $7,000.
Well, the whole project.
No, I know that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Yep.
Roger, quick question. On the slides, there's a picture of the really thick mesh netting. I can't remember the exact terminology.
Jute netting.
Jute netting. Does that allow growth in the netting? Will there still be some established planting that can
Yes, it
that can
does.
keep the ground in place?
Yeah. In
Okay.
fact, the jute netting is the intent. The intention of the jute netting is to, when our staff is going to get our water buffalo and throw some water on it every once in a while, jute netting holds onto that water and helps the seed mix establish.
Okay.
And it does allow the weeds.
It
to
looks
grow.
preventative. I just wanted to confirm. It looks pretty thick.
Yeah, it also does help with
Yeah.
erosion control.
Okay, thank you.
I have to look up what mule fat is.
I don't know what it is either.
It's a plant, huh?
Apparently
Mule
it's a
fat.
thing. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Right. Any other comments, questions? All right, let's take it to the public. I don't have any slips on this. Does anybody in the public want to talk about this? No, we don't have anybody on Zoom. So we'll bring it back to the council. So we need a motion to approve Amendment 2 to the agreement with M&S Engineering.
I will make a motion to approve Amendment 2 to the agreement with MSN Engineering for engineering support and environmental permitting for the South Alisal Emergency Project.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Claudia Aruna.
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth Aruna.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown absent. Mayor Infante.
Yes,
Motion passes 4-0.
thank you. That takes us to item 8B. If you'd introduce that for us, please, Madam Clerk.
Discussion and possible action to approve Amendment 2 to the agreement with M&S Engineers, Inc. for annual implementation, support, and compliance with the city's stormwater management plan permit for the additional amount not to exceed $133,000 for a total contract not to exceed $351,950, and extend the term to June 30th, 2025, and authorize the mayor to execute on behalf of the city.
Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Madam Clerk. So, like the other item, this one, there is another contract extension. Again, it's doing the same work that they've done over the past few years. But since earlier this year, we brought an item just letting council know that there was, that the annual report was recorded, and there was a number of questions that were asked. And I wasn't available to answer any questions, so I wanted to bring this presentation forward. And again, I'll try to be quick, but I want to answer as many questions as you have. So the stormwater management program. So we I'll go through this part real quick, but it's a federal, it's a state requirement that fulfills a federal requirement for clean water for our stormwater. So again, there's a lot of history behind it, but end of the day, we're currently under a permit with the Regional Water Quality Control Board that was issued in 2014. So I believe at the beginning it was a 5-year permit, but they're looking to extend the permit. But it seems like every time we talk about it, they say, "Oh, we're not quite ready yet." So they extend the permit. So we are currently joint permittees with the City of Buellton. So when the annual report gets together, we submit all of our information to Buellton. It gets packaged and it gets sent by Buellton and both our names. So that's why there's no formal approval process for the annual reporting. So what is our permit? Or what do we got to do, and what does M&S do for us is what I wanted to kind of let you guys know. So again, we're co-permittees is the cities of Buellton and Solvang. So we do have a memorandum of understanding. And so there are 10 different items here that, 10 different focus, and I'm going to try to, this thing turned off. Okay, so program management, M&S helps us to manage this program, which there are quite a few facets and a lot of different things that need to be done, including education and outreach. So it's not only, our city staff just sat through. We're required to annually sit through an education, and there's a test at the end, and we got to take and pass the test, including me. So I had to take it. And then, but we also do, there's a lot of other marketing type stuff. And we partner with multiple different agencies and we do that, and I'll get to that in the next slide. But there are other, we share in that burden with other agencies to do this education. There's public involvement and participation, which part of this is has become an annual thing, which is the art contest that we do for in the elementary schools. So we promote that. There's illicit discharge detection and elimination. So anytime there's reported that we see some dirt going into the storm drain, oils going into the storm drain, we act. We respond. We have M&S has an employee that goes out and checks it out, and then we find the source and we provide some education to that person, saying, "Hey, you're not supposed to do this," and then we report it. So again, this is not a bad thing. If this happens, it's actually a good thing because it all goes into the annual report, and the water board wants to see this. If the water board just says everything's hunky dory in Solvang, then they're going to say, "I don't believe you. I'm going to check it out." So. They want to see, yes, there was a discharge. This is what we did about it. This is how it was rectified, and this is how we're moving forward. So they like to see that. And so routinely there's 3 to 4 of these a year that we see. And again, M&S helps us out, helps us do that, and gets all the reporting in. Again, compiles all the stuff for the annual report and to submit. Construction site stormwater runoff control, this is kind of one of the bread and butters, is any time you see, they call them BMP, it's just a world of acronyms, but best management practices is what that stands for, and that is, straw wattles and other things around us, even if we're not going to rain, what happens if a, water main breaks or something else, you never know. So they got to have all this stuff established around the site so that there's not a lot of dirt that goes down to the storm drain, which then makes it to the river or the creeks and then the river. Pollution prevention and good housekeeping. Again, that's the source of illicit discharges, but we're all constantly going through and monitoring folks. One of the actions that we had to take last year was there was a local restaurant that was having their kitchen cleaned, and they had their equipment out in the alley, and they're pressure washing it. Well, kind of a greasy residue was left in the alley. It's like, no, you can't do that, guys. You got to. So then that resulted in some education and some other things with not only the restaurant owner but also the contractor they had hired to do the cleaning. So that's the sort of stuff that we do, and M&S was instrumental in that. Post-construction stormwater management is another thing, which is If your site is big enough, well, then now you're required to, and we're required to implement it, you're required to hold on to some of that water and let it soak into the ground, not just let it eventually flow to the river. Water quality monitoring, and there's two facets to this, but whenever there are storms, and not planned storms, but storms that we anticipate, we do have a firm, and this gets scheduled by M&S, and the data gets compiled by them, but we do have a firm go out there and actually collect some water samples and do the testing. And, they test for, not only contaminants, but also the turbidity, how cloudy is it, that sort of stuff. Program effectiveness and assessment, that's one of those things, one of the things that we got to do every year. And then total maximum daily loads compliance, so that's part of the water quality monitoring. That's one of the other things, but this is one of the hit points that's in our permit. So, again, we do share agreements with, it's a group called Our Water, Our World, which is a combination, Buellton, Carpinteria, Goleta, Santa Barbara, Santa Maria, and the County of Santa Barbara. So we all get together on that, and that's a lot of that marketing, a lot of that, the educational packets and information, so this is something that we sign up for. It's about $500-600 a year is what it is, but so we sign up for that, and then we're able to share in this information, the booklets, and provide links to people to look at this stuff. And then also we partner with Buellton, Carpinteria, Goleta, and the County of Santa Barbara for the 303D monitoring, which is it's the EPA Clean Water Act. So the St. Inez River is an impacted water body. So we're required to do this not only from the feds, but also part of our permit is we're required to monitor and make sure that we don't contribute to the problem any more than we already are. The committee involvement, so M&S is, they they're my proxy at several different committee meetings that, so I go every once in a while, but they also fill me in on what's going on, and if I actually need to go, or if there's an item that needs attention. And then, but M&S has been providing this permit support since 2009. So again, we are looking at a new permit, so, and I know that there's been a desire to put a lot of this stuff out to new RFP, and I think that when the new permit comes in, which is we're being told now that maybe by the fall, we'll get the initial draft of the new permit, and then we're going to have a 6 to 9 month period for, where all the agencies are going to be able to read it and comment on it. And then it'll go into place for next fiscal year. So at that time, that's probably a good time to come up for air and say, okay, let's do a new RFP. And if it turns out to be M&S or another firm, so be it. But this is why we extended it this year under the same thought, because we were being told that there's going to be a new permit next year. New permit hasn't materialized, but so now we're staying par for the course now. But when it does, that might be a good opportunity to go out to a new RFP. So this time next year, we might be awarding it to either M&S or someone else, a brand new contract. That concludes staff's presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the council?
Only a comment. I just like the fact that M&S is local, and they've been with us for a long time.
Yeah.
And I don't think they would have a problem at all with an RFP, because they know what they need to do and put it out and let it happen.
Any other comments, questions? In that case, I do not have any requests for public speaking. Do I have anybody in the audience that would like to speak on the subject? Nobody on Zoom? We'll bring it back to the council. We need to approve Amendment 2 to the agreement with M&S Engineering. Can I have a motion to do that, please?
I'll make a motion to approve Amendment 2 to the agreement with M&S Engineers for their annual implementation, support, and compliance with the city's stormwater management program.
I'll second it.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Claudia Arena.
Yes.
Arona, excuse me. Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown absent. Mayor Infante.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0. Thank you.
Mr. Murphy.
I just wanted to add, thanks, Roger, with that. A lot of people, well, I don't know about a lot. Some people might not understand why it takes us so long to process various things. And this is just one example. I mean, you saw all those permits and all the things, and yes, we have help, but it still takes staff time to coordinate it. These are the things that our regulators and our legislators are doing to us, and it's just, I just wanted to comment that it's frustrating in a lot of ways because there's so many things to do and very little time to do it. So this is just, it was good to be able to daylight this.
Yes, absolutely.
Good call.
Okay. We'll go through the technical issues to get it up on the screen, and we'll get a staff report. No, this is for item 8C, please, if you would introduce that for us, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Discussion and possible action to adopt Resolution 24-1266, adopting a biannual budget for fiscal years 2024 through 2026.
Staff report, please.
Okay. At the last council meeting, you were presented with a preliminary draft budget, and staff made the grant funding changes, and then we added in the chamber and added in the full-time management analyst position and the public works planning clerk position. Those were the changes that were made to the budget. And so if you look at this slide, for all the funds, the estimated revenues are the $25,847,063. Estimated expenses is $24,128,418. What? Oh, yeah, 24 million, sorry.
1917.
Yeah. So the change in the fund balance for all the funds would be $1,718,645,000. And for clarification to the public, all the funds include general fund, water, wastewater, transit, government impact fees, traffic safety, gas tax, local transportation, Measure A, Skip Mesa, Measure U, the vehicle pool, the OPED trust, and the Santa Ynez Valley T-bid. And those funds, we are only allowed to spend it on certain things for all those funds. The general fund is the only fund that we're allowed to spend on city operations. So for the 24-25 fiscal year budget for the general fund, the change in fund balance net position will be $414,961. Water fund will be a net change of $328,026. Wastewater fund will be $47,145, and the transit fund will be $926,122. For the fiscal year 25-26, the net position for general fund is in a deficit of $1,558,423. We will need to use Measure U funds, which is a general fund expense, to cover the deficit for the year 25-26. And will staff is to create a strategic plan to spend that money, and moving forward, hopefully we can determine what expenses we can use out of Measure U for the general fund, and those will be expenses that we use on a regular basis, and we don't have to go back to the Measure U committee every year to determine how we're going to spend the money. And then water fund will have a net change position of $29,313. Wastewater fund will have a net change of $376,842. And transit will have a net change of $925,193 for year 25-26. So general fund revenues, we're looking at 10 million, hang on, what was my spot? $10,932,272 in revenue. Total expenses is $10,517,311, which is revenue over expense is projected to be $414,961. General fund's main sources of revenue is transient occupancy tax and how do you go back? Anyways, go back, there we go. So transient occupancy is $4,754,000 for 24-25 compared to 23-24, which is $4,900,000. And we did reduce the revenue based on the local, our tax consultants. They said that revenue should decrease about 3%. So our numbers are conservative to go in line with that. Sales tax revenue will be $1,960,564 compared to $2,021,000 for 23-24. Sales tax is 18% of the city's overall general fund revenue. Property tax revenue is estimated to be $1,567,871, which is a 6.2% increase from 23-24. Property tax makes up 15% of the city's general fund revenue. So the next slide is the general fund expenses. And the total expenses are $10,517,311, which I stated below or before. Water fund, the revenue is predicted, hang on. The water fund balance will be increased by $328,026. One of the big changes in the water fund is we removed the suspension A table, water table, and we put that in 25-26. That is purchase of water that we have the availability to do, but we have to, we can only do it when the city or the county releases that. So it's an ongoing expense that is listed in the budget until one day we get to purchase it. For the water revenue, for 24-25, the water revenue is $5,994,000. We do have a water and wastewater rate study that's in effect until 26-27, and every year the water service charge and the wastewater service charge goes up by that rate study amount. Water expenses are projected to be $5,666,000. $196, and personnel expenses are always the most in all the expense categories, and wastewater revenue is projected to be $2,886,000. The wastewater fund does have a deficit of $613,223 due to not raising the rates in prior years, and with all the expenses in the capital improvement project. That fund currently has a deficit, but each year it does go down by the amount that we put into the fund balance. And in the next couple of years, that you should see that become a positive number. The wastewater expenses are $2.8 million And there's been an increase in personnel, supplies, utilities, repairs, and maintenance. And understand that capital improvement figures are not in this budget as of yet. It does have to be approved by the Planning Commission to be compliant with the general plan. And although you guys are approving the budget tonight with, by a resolution, the numbers are the budget, but we put it into an entire budget book, and that budget book will come forward with the capital improvement project. And what that does is it just lists it's for the GFOA award as well. It lists the departments, the descriptions, it has council pictures in it, and it's like a storybook of Solvang's history and budget. So that will come before you in, I think, the first meeting in August. So if you happen to make changes tonight with the resolution, we do need to state what those changes will be, and we will add those figures or delete those figures in the budget, and the budget will be approved based on those figures. And then because David Brown excused himself from the grant funding, do you want to? Yeah. Okay.
So just for the record, we'll note that any adoption of the budget, should the council choose to do that, we just want to note for the record that even though Member Brown is absent, that he did recuse himself for any of the votes regarding the AdderDag at home grant funding.
And then looking ahead in the future, changes could be the comp and class study. There's options possibly to reduce the CalPERS pension liability. We will be doing a fee study starting in July, and that will come before you in January. And then the wastewater treatment plant upgrade financing and city council goal completion. So with that, I will give it back to you guys for questions.
Questions, anybody?
I just want to confirm, Wendy, all budgets have increased net positive as a result of this exercise. Is that right?
All what? Say
Have
that again?
increased net positive?
Yes, general fund for 24-25 did with the Measure U monies.
And that last comment about Measure U, the Measure U to cover 25, 26, you didn't give us a projection for the Measure U numbers, but it should be also net positive. Is that?
Well, we have, in 25-26, we have a deficit of 1.5 million. So based on the strategic plan and what the Measure U and staff decides for expenses for those monies to be spent on, then we will bring that back as a mid-cycle budget, and we will go over those costs then.
So I understand, I have in my head that the projection for 25, 26 was about 1.7 million.
It's
for Measure U.
1.5.
Okay, so we're okay. If all things work out, we should be even. It's a forecast, so, but.
With Measure U money, yes, the general fund will be balanced.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Murphy, I'm sorry, were you done?
No, I am done, thank you.
Mr. Murphy?
Yeah, I was going to point out, so as Wendy pointed out, the idea with presenting it this way is we don't want to assume the Measure U committee is going to recommend anything. The intent is to meet with them, develop the strategic plan, identify existing expenses that they feel are consistent with the will of the voters, and then building the budget based on that, or amending the budget, I guess, for 25, 26, so that we're consistent with that, and that potentially would free up other general fund dollars to take care of other unknown or unanticipated expenses, grant funding, and those kinds of things.
And with the budget book, Jason and I had to do training on how to implement this program. And once the budget's approved and we have the budget book done, it will be a go live portal, and the public can go in and play with graphs and look at the budget figures, but we have to get everything finalized first. And I'd like to give a shout out to Jason. He's in the audience tonight. He did a remarkable job getting all these figures in.
So you're just giving it to him so we can complain to him instead of you?
No, you can complain to me. That's
Just
what I'm
kidding,
here
Jason.
for.
Is this a good time to bring up some of the changes to it before we go into public comment?
I think that should more appropriately probably be in discussion and deliberation amongst you all to because you have to come to agreement on what changes you'd like to see to the budget. So I
Before?
would suggest opening public comment now, because this period before public comment is really just for questions for staff.
Okay. Any other questions for the staff before we go to public comment? No? I don't have any slips requesting comments. Do we have anybody that would like to make a, excuse me, a comment on this subject right now in the public? No? And we have nobody on Zoom. So now it comes back to us and we can start this process. Yes, sir.
I would like to point out that there are people on Zoom. There are just nobody on Zoom wishing to comment.
Well, I don't, I'm sorry, thank you.
There's a hand raised.
Mr. Richardson, what can we do for you?
I was thinking as you made those comments about if you're going to make changes to the budget, I think it would be a good idea if the public knew what those changes were so they were able to comment on them before you vote. If you take our comments, then we cannot comment on your changes. So I would appreciate it if you would do the changes now and then come ask for more public comment.
Thank you. That's kind of what I was thinking, but you didn't want to do it that way.
As chair of the meeting, you certainly can allow for more public comment after
Thank you.
the deliberation. I just wanted, typically, the order of the meeting is
I understand.
staff report, questions, public comment, and then deliberation and discussion of the council.
Okay, so there was a couple of things that have been discussed. And do you want to introduce those, Randy, or do you want me to introduce those, or how do you want to do this?
I'll follow your lead.
Oh, you'll follow my lead. Thanks a lot. Okay, so a couple things, and this is there's a couple of elements that we want to put into the budget for approval. One of them is that the senior center, we wanted to give them a contract to handle phones for us, for calls from seniors about what services are available, things of that nature. That would amount to about $5,000 a month.
Yeah.
And so that would give us, what, $60,000 a year? And that would be one of the items that we're talking about adding in. The other item that we were talking about adding in, and as the gentleman that came up earlier talked about grant requests, we went through a lot in looking with the ad hoc committee, looking at grant requests. And what we decided was based on the fact that we were running out of money, and then we figured out, well, we wouldn't be that bad. The other part of this is the ad hoc committee, because of Brown Act rules, can only be 2 of us at any one point in time. So as a consequence, not everybody necessarily agreed with the ad hoc committee on the grant writing or the grant donations access. So what we would like to propose is that every council member has the right, okay, we'll still do the ad hoc committee, we'll still come up with what we think the city would approve for each of these official grant requests. And there's going to be a whole set of rules on how we do this, because they have to be official. We don't give it to anybody else. But each one of us will have $25,000 that we may apply as we decide to the individual grantees, grantors, requesters, whatever the good word is for that, in addition to whatever the city has done. We do not have to spend it. We do not have to do anything else. We want to give everybody on the council the opportunity to support organizations that they are particularly interested in. So there's $125,000 there potentially available that would be in the budget, potentially available between the five of us to allocate to those who have done the grant requests per the rules, and those grant requests have been approved. Now we need to know how much money to give to each of those. So what we're doing then is modifying, and we need to have staff to write up a whole set of rules on how this is going to work. But the idea is to add into the budget $125,000 based on $25,000 for each of the five of us to have to allocate to approved grant requestors.
125 total, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, 125 total or $25,000 per council member?
$25,000 per council member, which adds up to $125,000.
So I can have a pet project of the Santa Ynez High School Aquatics, and they can apply, and me as a council member can say, I want them to have that money.
Yes.
Hold on. I think it's important to make sure that we restate
This-
the procedure policy, the ad hoc committee. The policy doesn't change. What we've done is federated an earmarked value to each council member to either direct or not direct. Is that right?
Right. You don't have to use the money. You don't have to give it, and you can only give it to those who have followed the rules in the grant requests and have been, the grant requests have been approved, if you will, and then we can say what money to apply to it. Again, the ad hoc committee is going to get a chance, the first swipe at it for the whole city, and then each of us will have an option then to add to any of those grant requesters that we choose to. Mr. Murphy?
I was going to say that this kind of came up. The county does something similar with the Board of Supervisors, where there's discretionary funds available to each of the supervisors to allocate based on their desire. It's very strict rules, and we'll work with legal to establish some guardrails, but just kind of top of the head thinking it would be individuals or groups that have participated in the grant funding process but did not receive the amount that they originally requested.
It's called pork.
If you wish.
There are various ways to describe it, but the point is that if a group comes in and wishes to have their grant, get monies granted to them, and the council as a body decides to fund the entire request, there will be no additional funding given. But in years like this, where money is tighter, and there is a particular passion of one or more of the council based on the denial of the full amount, they could allocate the entire $25,000 to a single, individually to a single group, or they could divide it up amongst various other, five, for instance, do a 25, or again, as was pointed out, if you don't support this individually, then you don't have to give it.
Nope.
But it's an opportunity to make the grant requesters whole. And again, it was just the thought that, again, it's replicating what is done with the current Board of Supervisors. It is also done in other jurisdictions.
It's a good approach, but I just want to emphasize, Randy, two other things. We are also still going to reinforce the validation that applicants have, if they've received grant funding before, still meet the criteria of showing us the receipts when required, and that they're re-eligible to be in consideration. The second thing is that we are also going to still proceed with the information and education step so that all applicants know what the process is and what to expect and how to put forward a good application, things like that. Right, and that they should participate in that education informed session to also be eligible.
That's the intent, yes.
And we do need a full set of rules on how this is going to work, and so we will require the staff to write that up. But as a part of the budget, those are the two items. So we got 60,000 for the senior center, and then we've got 125,000 for the city council members to use for grant.
Discretionary grant funds, we'll call it.
Discretionary grant funds, good term, I like that. Any other comments, questions?
I can't even begin to start. This is the wackiest thing I've ever heard. This is pay to play. This is your favorite charity. I raise money for 15, 20 different charities. I put on golf tournaments. I put on bake sales for aquatics, for the church, for Fawcett Mall Dance Academy. Hey, you guys, apply for a grant, and I'm the guy that can give you $25,000. This stinks to high heaven. I know I'm the knee-jerk weird guy on the council that is nutty with the wallet, but this is the stupidest thing I have ever heard. That's my opinion. Thank you. Aye. I'll kind of vote no.
So I'd like to just point out that we didn't really, I would just ask the staff to make sure that when we talk about Measure U, it is talked about as general fund. We really have had access and an understanding of that funding for probably 16 to 18 months now. And we really separated that conversation into two steps, which led us to a perception that we were short and didn't have enough money, and we actually did. And the monies are really, the way they're used, they're commingled. In the way they're applied, they're general funding. So it'd just be good for us to evolve as we, get used to this Measure U spend, not suggesting we do. I'm a supporter of the committee and taking their recommendations and actually putting also more rigorous process around how they want to spend so it's predictable and anticipated. But just the public's pretty, they're following this and they're very smart. We are, we need to treat the money as a combined general fund bucket.
Yes, sir.
Point well taken, Councilmember Arona. There were a lot of moving pieces in the process this year. We're converting to new software. You saw some of the pretty graphs and charts that were presented when Wendy was doing her thing. So that took a lot of staff training. We had staff illnesses. We had a lot of stuff coming at us. The Measure U committee didn't get formed until late in the game. We now have a committee, and again, we'll have a strategic plan established here in a not-too-distant future. So I'm confident that we won't trip up like we did this year.
And we as staff can't just assume what the Measure U committee will want to spend the money on. That was part of the problem. And so moving forward for next year, my plan is to have a budget workshop separate from the city council meeting, and we will have the Measure U committee, we will have the grant funding, and we will have council all present to go through the budget in a workshop in a public forum.
That's a great idea.
I have one more request because so I paid a lot of attention to the budget and the numbers, and I asked a ton of questions. So thank you for answering all my questions. There were increases in a lot of places, and I think they are mostly productive. There's one area that still bothers me, and it has to do with Yule Fest, and so I'm just going to ask the staff, not that we wouldn't approve it, but to please take a look at the increasing costs on the Yule Fest in particular budget line item to make sure it's almost 3x by the time we get to next year in increased cost. So there has to be something in exchange for that increase that we're getting as a city. And it's a big number now at $440,000. We ought to have a bonanza in the city of Solvang for that kind of money.
Well, and that $440,000 also includes the ice skating rink.
Okay.
And we did not do it this year because it was nearly impossible to implement And with the weather, we have to look at the weather, we have to look at the location, and logistically, you have to have staff to run it. So it wasn't feasible to put in the budget for 24, 25, and that's why there's a huge increase in the 25, 26, because that skating rink is in there. And that will be part of the Measure U discussion on
Okay.
whether that money, they had decided in the 24, 25, that they would give up to $50,000 for that skating rink, which is a minimal cost savings to the general fund. And also, Jenny wasn't getting feedback from the ice skating rink people because chances are they were probably already all booked. So logistically, we have to be very careful on implementing that because if we do have warm temperatures, it will melt and we will lose all that money that we spent.
Then we'll have to do water skiing, not ice skating.
Yeah.
You mean there's a lot of variables still we need to understand. I would just ask that we have a chance to review it before, we'll review the budget again coming around next year, but
Yes.
we need the data before, or the assessment before we,
Well, we're going to get this
Yeah.
budget back to us again,
Yes.
because we don't even have the CIP yet, and that's going to be put into it, right?
That'll come in August, yes.
Yes, but you do need either to approve the figures that we put in before you tonight. I would guess with the changes to the senior center and the 125,000
Discretionary grant,
discretionary
yeah.
grant funds. If you don't, then you need to make a motion to approve spending effective July 1. Correct, Chelsea?
Are you asking if they don't adopt a budget today?
Yes.
I mean, you could, I would just recommend that they adopt a budget with whatever line items they're all, a majority of them are comfortable with. Yeah. Because if we don't adopt a budget, then we got to get into continuing resolution territory, which is a whole nother set of
Yeah, we
approvals.
don't want to do that. Yes, sir.
I was just going to point out in reference to the ice skating issue, just so everybody understands, the $300,000, that we have to budget that. That's what the estimate for cost was. There will be admission charged, and that should more than pay for that amount. But we still have to budget for it because we can't anticipate the revenue. The Measure U committee agreed to cover up to $50,000 in the event that it did not pay for itself. So if it all goes as planned, we'll actually make a little more money than we spend on that. But that was why the $300,000 was in there. We have to budget because that's what it would cost us. There is another option. Jenny was looking into possibly getting somebody in here to operate it and do it all, and we wouldn't have to pay anything. So that's another thing that we're trying to run to ground. But again, it was too much to try and bite off for this year. So we've got a year and a half head start.
And then based on Yule Fest this year, some of the issues were there weren't enough bathrooms. And so I think it was $25,000 increase in the Yule Fest budget is to include multiple porta potties. So there are more restrooms, and that will increase cleaning and expenses for supplies.
All right, so we will give the public one more chance. If you've got a comment on this idea, and I see it. Go ahead, Jim, you started this. Let's see what you've got to say, please.
As I represent the senior center, I may be stepping into something that I don't want you to hold that against the senior center. But I agree with Mr. Clark. I think that you're stepping into dangerous territory. It's called earmarks in Congress, if you remember that, and the brouhaha that happens because of that. Think about this, that $25,000 is going to be distributed per district. Think about that. 5 of you, 5 districts, or 4 districts, and it could have a direct impact on your vote. So I would seriously think that you should not set a definite amount, i.e. so many dollars, but maybe a percentage of what might be surplus to the grant process. And I had one other thought, just like you, I've slipped my mind. Oh, man.
But the surplus is a good idea, John. I know I shouldn't.
Well, that's, I appreciate that. It's, those are the feelings. Oh, that's what it was. This subject of earmarks is not on the agenda.
Nope.
I would think that you should drop that back to another meeting and discuss earmarks as a separate item on a budget, instead of springing it on here, because it's not been announced that you were going to do that kind of thing. So I'd hope you to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Mr. Brown, I think you had a comment.
Can the city attorney comment on that?
On what?
On whether it's appropriate to be discussing this as opposed to its own separate item?
That's a good question. What do you think?
Well, excuse me, I am losing my voice.
I'm sick too.
The item that is on the agenda is the budget, and you're discussing adding a line item to the budget. So I think it's an appropriate discussion, and considering also that grant funding generally is already a line item on the budget. So it's just kind of a how you're going to do it question. So it's appropriate. Could it have been more clearly laid out in the staff report? Sure, but it's within the scope of what is there. There's a lot of line items in the budget, and so it's hard to highlight everything.
If I may add, I think if the public was aware of this line item, this room would be full out to the parking lot. To give 5 council members $25,000 to give to their favorite charity, the city needs to know about this. The residents need to know about this.
If we want to conclude public comment before we get back to discussion, I just don't want to
sorry.
forget about anyone
I'll
else
say
who
it
wants
again.
to speak.
Mr. Brown, you had a comment?
Well, thank you for reconsidering all of this. I think it's been a difficult period for everyone, and I appreciate, and I hope that my previous comment, it was not meant to give offense. It was simply meant to express my view of what had happened. And I think that, respect to Councilmember Clark, I think it's a legitimate issue about how municipalities fund public services through nonprofits. I think there's pro and con points on that, and I would like to see the city of Solvang at some point, maybe before the next funding thing, if you haven't already, maybe you haven't, I haven't heard about it, that's possible, really consider what the city's stance is, what the city's position is on the grant funding for nonprofits and social services, which ones you feel are really important, which ones you feel are more discretionary. That I would think would be a valuable thing to do. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Beebe, did you want to speak? You always want to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council members, thank you for your continued support to our community. I'm Dennis Beebe. I'm in Solvang, 32 years now. I agree with Council Member Clark. This is pork. This is earmarks, and I just don't know where it came from. It bolted out of the blue. I agree there'd be a lot more people here if it was known that this procedure was going to be discussed. I don't think there's a consensus that this is a good idea or that this process ought to be as described. I think it deserves approval by an entire 5-member council before you proceed with this sort of thing. It just blows my mind. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Dennis. Okay, so at this point, we need a motion to approve the budget, which we need to do.
Have a quick, discussion.
Exactly.
Since we have to approve the budget tonight, and we can defer procedurally how a percentage of surplus or a line item on budget would be used, can we proceed with just a human grant funding line item and assume policy governs that, and then determine later with more public input the procedural methodology for expenditure?
That's kind of what I was thinking. I was going to suggest that the motion is to approve the budget and then direct staff to come back with a policy. Ideally, part of the motion could be to allocate a not to exceed amount or something like that.
Yeah,
In that, but for purposes of putting it in the budget. But if you want to wait until the policy is approved, we could work around
We could
that
treat
as
it as a placeholder. It doesn't need to be consumed in the end game. It gets treated like any other budget line item, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
If the majority of the council is not comfortable with placing a dollar amount on it tonight, you can always amend the budget. So when it comes back with the CIP, you have the full numbers, you have a policy laid out, like you could do an amendment at that time too. So, but the
So-
important thing is to pass a budget tonight.
That-
so we can keep
We need a motion to
functioning.
pass the budget, and I'd like to say to put the one contract in for the senior center, so that's a part of it. But then I kind of agree with everybody here that we need to make that, get a staff report and make it an agenda item to discuss it.
And if I could lastly add, not to get on a soapbox, but I've raised my family from grade school through college in this town, and because they were in dance and youth and government and sports and all kinds, I did nothing but raise money for 18 years. And my message to the residents of Solvang, it is not the city or the taxpayers' responsibility to pay for my good deeds. It's not the city's responsibility or the taxpayers' responsibility to pay for your good deeds. If you want to raise money and give food away, gosh, God bless you. That's altruistic. It's not altruistic doing it with somebody else's money. And to do a 25, I thought I went to the bathroom and came back, the Babylon Bee had taken over. I'm shocked about this. So I've never felt this passionately about, this is pure pork. So boy, oh boy, I'm just surprised. So I'm done.
It's surprising that you have so much passion after we've already given some grant money away. It's already in the budget. And you were part of the ad hoc committee, so.
Discretionary 25, here's 25 grand. What's your favorite charity?
No, I think there's an application process that can be.
I understand that.
Can be put in front of that. It's not a direct.
Okay,
But this is a one-on-one deal.
okay, so if I may,
Go ahead.
we need a motion to approve this budget to get the city, keep the city moving. I'd like to leave the senior center addition in that contract into that budget. The other item then will be sent to staff to come up with a suggestion on how it might work and brought to us on another agenda to decide whether we want to do that or not. And Mr. Brown will be here presumably. So we've got a full 5 people in the council to talk about it.
Okay, so if the pork is out, I will vote on it. So that's where we're at right now.
That's where we are right now.
All right,
And
thank
if I may, so the motion would be to approve resolution number 24-1266 with one amendment to add, and Randy, you might have to help me make sure I get the numbers right, add the service contract for the senior center in an amount not to exceed $60,000, right?
Right.
So that would be the motion, and then you can separately give direction to staff to come back with a policy for discretionary grant funding.
Okay, so that's the motion that I'll make right now, that we approve the budget, and resolution, what is it, 24-1266, adopting the budget for the fiscal years 24-26 with one amendment, that is the contract to the senior center.
I'll
Have a
second.
second.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Claudia Arona.
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown absent, Mayor Infante.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
All right, so the last item then is that we would like to direct staff, if everybody agrees, to have staff write us up a idea on how we can do this grant funding process if we want to, so we can bring it back on another meeting and let the public talk about it.
I think that's worthy of evaluating.
All right? Yes?
Consensus? we'll do it.
Okay. In that case, last comments, last chance.
Just
Been-
appreciate all the effort from the finance team and the city staff.
Yes.
I'm looking at Wendy's stack of papers. I'm sure that's just like not even representative of the effort. Thank you is the point of the message. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am calling the meeting concluded here at 8:11. We are done.